All right, everybody. Like I mentioned, this is one of the panels that I'm so excited about. This is our Fan Tech panel. So I'm going to bring Denisha to the stage so she can introduce her panelists. Denisha, take it away.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. And so excited to be here. As we discussed, this panel is focused on fan tech and audience engagement. So to kick things off, we are going to start with intros. So a little bit about myself. My name is Denisha. In addition to working in venture banking, I also spend a lot of my time at the intersection of music and technology, specifically for purposes of this conversation, writing a newsletter and freelance writing, specifically a blog called Stan. Stan studies the bi-directional relationships between artists and their fans. So excited to dig in today with all our panelists and dig into questions. First, Erica Fagundes, would you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, yeah, I'm Erica. Nice to meet you all. I run music partnerships at community.com, which is, if you've ever seen any artists tell you to text them, that we are the product that fuels that relationship. So hello.
Awesome. Jaquel.
Hi, everybody. So great to be here. I'm Jaquel. I'm the CEO and founder of Fave. We are a social platform and marketplace for superfans. So if you ever were obsessed with your favorite artist, we are the place where you can come and just unapologetically obsess and connect with other fans.
Maura?
Hey everyone, I'm very excited to be here. My name is Mara. I run the data science and data engineering teams at Patreon, which is a platform that makes it really easy for fans to pay creators directly through monthly subscriptions all over the world. We have about 8.5 million fans paying about 250,000 creators. So my job is to dig into the data about those relationships, which is very fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. So to start things off, I think it would be great if we kind of discuss two things. So one, we've all talked about fans in our various intros and artists interacting with fans. But in this ever-changing world, how do we think about the definition of fan and how that plays into the value of fan-driven communities? Who'd like to kick off?
I'm happy to kick us off. Yeah, I definitely think that there's like a fan funnel, right? There are people that have maybe seen and interacted with your art once or twice. Those might be like your followers. Then you have your dedicated fans who like watch every video or listen to every song. And then I think about like your paying fans, like fans that are going to buy the merch or the ticket for your concert, or pay you directly through platforms or online. But I think the nature of like what it means to be a fan is changing, especially as consumption becomes easier and easier. Like you could see a TikTok that you love and suddenly be a fan of that creator. So I do think there's like a wider definition of fan that's beginning to occur. Curious what others see.
Yeah, I can add on to that naturally because I look at that same funnel, but I'll add maybe one more layer as you're calling the paying fan, right? The people who will typically seen as like the real diehards. I also like to look at it as fans who may not have the funds to pay, but are still just as, going hard for the artist, right? So those who may live in another country, but if they buy merch, like it's not going to ship out to where they are, or the artist never comes to their town, but they're sitting there wanting to connect, wanting to engage. And I am very interested in that slice because oftentimes those are the ones who are eager for so much, right? From the community, from the artists themselves. And so I like to understand how that funnel plays on your kind of diehard nature of what you want to contribute, right? So look at it as, okay, if their song is on the radio, great, like I'll listen to it, right? Or streaming, right? I'll listen to it. Then there's that like, okay, I will seek out the artist, right? It's beyond casual listening. I'll seek them out when they have something new. And then there's the seek out, like I wake up in the morning to find out if I ever missed anything, right? And that's that, super fan nature. And I really like how, to your point, Mara, as well, that definition is evolving because there's so much more that fans can get their hands in, right? It's not not just, okay, if the artist comes around like to my town, I can see them, but there's, social now, there's ways for people to express their own creativity around their own fandom. And I love that fans can see themselves kind of taking some of the forefront, at least that's what we're aiming to do, so that their passions can be seen as well from the artist, not only just the artist energy to them. So I love the evolution happening.
Yeah, Jaquel, so, we are also free for fans. So basically it's a platform that you're just texting with your favorite artists, like you would your friends and family. And, to answer your question, I think that artists that have that connection with fans, especially in modern day, is almost necessary at this point of how we communicate in general. So having that real deep connection with your fans leads to long lasting fans. So especially for emerging artists that, your fans are obsessed with you at this point, how do you take them and create this relationship with them that keeps them going long term and also makes them feel like they're connected to your journey and shouting you out from the rooftop, so then your audience continues to grow and grow. So I think creating this community, for no pun intended, but it's really hard to not say community when you talk about community, creates your long lasting career and what you want to do. So yeah.
Totally. Super helpful. I actually wrote an article talking about followers, fans, and stans, and kind of how followers don't necessarily equate fans or even stans in the beginning. Something that I think I've continued to see and what's really interesting is kind of sometimes over optimism of audience and audience conversion and who's actually fans, given now that we have so many touch points into ways to express our fandom. I think about a followings. I follow over 1,000 folks on TikTok. So what really does my follow of an artist connotate? And so to that point, I love to dig a little bit deeper into each of the individual platforms that you guys represent and how you think about leveraging either the data or insights that come from those platforms to help artists in terms of their audience engagement, as well as really for them to just understand what it means. Jaquel,
go. Sorry.
go ahead.
So one of the things that's really interesting that we focus on is, so social media, obviously, to your point, you have this huge following, but maybe that's not even translating to sales or streams or whatever it may be. And that's because of algorithms, and the more people that follow you, the less percentage of your following is even seeing your posts, because the way that social media makes their money is ad spend. So, and then on top of that, I have artists that I absolutely love, and then I don't follow on social media. So you're really limited to who is actually even seeing these posts. So texting is a place that we all have our notifications on for. It's one of the few places that we can communicate that we communicate with our friends and family on a daily basis. So 90% of our texts are open in the first 3 minutes, and it's allowing your audience that does care about what you have to do, saying, hey, I have a new music video out. Hey, my tour is going on sale and I'm giving you an exclusive pre-sale. So that's what really drives all of that. And then I think secondary is, in terms of the data aspect of it, is we do have first party and zero party data on our platform. So you're able to say, oh, I live in Los Angeles. So if you have a show in LA and, it's at a venue that's over the age of 21, you don't want to blast that out to everyone, which is what social media only allows you to do. So people just start to funnel it out. So you could say, I want to send this to everyone over the age of 21 that's within X amount of miles of Los Angeles. And it's hey, I'm going to be in your city, buy tickets to my show. On top of that, the zero party data aspect is asking fans what they're interested in hearing about or where they listen to your music. So let's say it's a Spotify listening session, you'll be able to even target and say, I want to send this to everyone who listens to my music on Spotify that's over the age of 21 living in LA. So that's kind of how we incorporate data, but also creating authenticity around it and targeted. Yeah.
One of the things I love about that, Erica, that I definitely see in community.com, and there are a lot of Patreon creators that also use community.com, so there's some cool overlap there, is that it allows creators to have a more direct ownership of their audience. If you, just put your music out on a large distribution platform, you might not really know who your fan is, but if you have a way to directly contact your fans, make sure that text is delivered, make sure that post goes to their inbox, it creates a different kind of relationship, because instead of waking up and being oh, did I miss the latest video? from this
Totally.
creator I love, you know that you're going to get it if that creator has some direct connection to you. It almost is kind of like bringing back like the email lists of the late 90s, right? Like you have your like listserv and you're like, these are my people. So I definitely think that is changing, that direct creator to fan relationship. And definitely Denisha, in terms of the data, like the data we have on Patreon definitely shows that the deeper that relationship is, like if a creator sends a fan a personalized message or directly is delivering exclusive content to their members, those members will retain their payments longer. Basically, they'll like keep that paying relationship for longer. And ultimately the creator will make more money directly from those fans, and also not even money, but like build a deeper relationship with them. So I think there's something very powerful in that direct line of communication that isn't necessarily as possible on the large distribution platforms.
Totally, totally. Let's talk about case studies for a bit. So, as much as I try to hide it, I'm a huge Drake fan, and I think it's no coincidence that like one of his biggest or highest performing videos commercially is God's Plan, where he's literally giving his budget, his music video budget back to his fans. I recently saw an update on Twitter of one of those fans who received a scholarship from, I believe she went to University of Miami, and like how meeting Drake and that scholarship changed her life. I'm curious whether it's as a result of your platform or just things that you've seen that are interesting to you guys. What are some ways that fans artists are engaging with their fans? I think a lot about the bi-directional relationship. Fans continue to be so impressive in all the ways that they kind of express their admiration and adulation for these fans. But looking at the flip side of it, beyond the product or the music, what are some things that are interesting to you, or specific examples that you see artists doing to give back to their fans now that excite you?
I'm happy to start here. I've seen a lot of fans get inspired by not just the community of fans that they have, but the kind of person that the artist is and how they want to be inspired by that to live a better life. And I think that's, the love that we all have for music, but things like the fandom raising a bunch of money for the charity that the artist cares about, right? Or them wanting to go pick up litter on the street because they see the artist, caring about that and doing that, right? Or like, these are some of the conversations that we have with artist teams where they want to have their fans participate in the things that they love. It has nothing to do with their music, nothing to do with anything, but just like, I'm this kind of person and my fans are also that kind of person, right? And it just makes them a better person for being inspired by them. And I think it's been interesting too, because the common thread that we see across fans within the same fandom are often for these like innate traits that they have, right? Like we all are givers and therefore we happen to love this artist, but that's why we get along so well, because I walk into a room and we're the same kind of person, right? And so I think being inspired by these like human, traits that these artists have been powerful as a method to connect the people who love them. And I think that, right, is really interesting to observe.
I love that. It's like a fan learning about their values through a creator almost, right? Like
That's exactly
they're inspiring you to like get in a deeper relationship with yourself and who you are and what you love. And yeah, I love that. I was going to say one thing I've seen that I think is really interesting, and I also think it's an area that's going to be really enabled by technology, is fan and artist collaborations. Two ideas that come to, or two examples that come to mind here. One, Amanda Palmer, who's a musician on the platform, she made a post and said, like, throw all your darkest feelings right now in the comments, like just share what's going on in the world and your grief and all the hard stuff. And she wrote a song then inspired by all of those comments, like pulling in those fans' comments to the song that was, an amazing, beautiful song. And similarly, Jacob Collier, who's a musician, also uses Patreon. He does these really cool harmonizations where fans send in videos of themselves singing, and then he harmonizes like 8 different layers of harmony on top of it. And as a fan, it's really cool because you feel, first of all, it's like amazing if you get to collaborate with one of your favorite creators, but then there's also new art being created from both ideas. And I feel like with platforms and technology, that's going to become way more possible. It's, it'll be easier to send a creator a video file and then they can like add on top of it. So yeah, I think there's something there in terms of like what will happen
like
next.
them duetting, the fan duetting a remix.
Yeah.
Just saying like that was amazing. Really cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the fan engagement stuff is actually like a key part of community. So like, even like more like one thing that one of our artists did was have fans send them a voice memo of them all singing this one melody line. And she basically made that the bottom of her song and called it For My Friends. So all the people in her community were actually in the song. One that was one of my favorites recently was Bryson Tiller. It was the 10-year anniversary of Killer Instinct. So he dropped Killer Instinct 2 as a private SoundCloud link on Halloween, and just kind of kept up to date, sending his fans voice memos like, hey, I know it's late. I'm in the studio finishing the last finishing touches. To this day, he hasn't even talked about it on his social media at all. He just dropped it and was like, do what you will with this. And, you know, people obviously shared it around. And then I think on more deeper level, like Shawn Mendes has a meditation community, and he'll just talk about, you know, his breathing practice and like feeling appreciative of the world and, you know, how we go about that. And then we also do a lot around voter registration. So during like the election, we partnered with, well, When We All Vote is a nonpartisan organization that encourages people to register to vote. And so they partnered with a lot of people on our platform. So then on their 18th birthday, artists could wish people a happy birthday and say, hey, are you registered to vote yet? Let me know if you have any questions. Here's the link. For artists that are passionate about that as well. So yeah, there's a bunch of different things that we do around that.
Yeah. So I'd like to dig a little deeper on kind of the strategy of building community, and then how that kind of relates into being able to kind of have a viable direct-to-fan business. So right around George Floyd, I wrote this article called "Your Favorite Celebrity is Not Coming to Save You," basically talking about activism and the roles that fandoms play in activism. I think it helps sometimes, it hurts. Dependent on the community. I've also covered it from like the Nigerian NSARS and the role they've had for African artists to kind of stand up and speak up. But much to that point, I continue to be fascinated by artist communities that don't always rely solely, I guess, on the artist. And I think No Name's a great example, like what No Name stands for in her community around reading and just overall rights in general, like is just lives way beyond her. But to that standpoint, I think there's real implications, right? When you build a community that's so evident on maybe certain morals or principles, and if the artist themselves does something that potentially goes against the community beyond that, how do we think about that? So two-part question, but essentially, I think direct-to-fan is viable, but probably viable for a certain archetype of artist. In your opinion, what archetype of artist is it more viable for? And what type of community should they prioritize building if they do want to take that approach?
I can start here. This is such a good and complicated question, Denisha. One of the things I've seen in terms of the archetype is that some creators don't want to be community managers. Either one, don't want to, or two, like they don't know how to. Being a community manager is extremely challenging. And so being both an artist and a creator and a community manager is like, doing double duty. You're having two jobs. And so I definitely think on Patreon, we see creators who don't want to be community managers, don't really create and invest in that community. But I think it can be very powerful to have a community that runs itself. But again, it needs like the tools and the leaders to do so. Because I think without that, as we all know, communities can get very toxic and fan communities can get very toxic. So we've seen that. We have a bunch of creators that use Discord as their like community tool, and then they'll appoint moderators within their fan community. But again, the community needs those people to like step up and manage it and stay stable over a long enough time, because I've definitely seen when those moderators leave or those leaders in the community leave, then suddenly there's like no organization and it kind of, doesn't thrive in the same way. So I think, that's sort of what I see around the persona, and then like the tools that enable it. But my hope is that the tools get good enough that even creators who are maybe nervous about managing a community have enough support from technology that it's easier for them to do so in a way that is like healthy and fosters good relationships with their fans.
Yes, 1,000%. So much of what we do at Fave is taking the artists who are intimidated by being a community manager. And I love that you call it a role, because it is in fact a very heavy thing to do, right? And allow them to feel equipped to still have engagement with their fans, but not be as hands-on as they may not have time for, right? And so there's the slice of artists that the Patreon, the community is absolutely probably the best thing for them. But for those who like don't have time to engage, it's okay, how can we appoint, moderators to run this? How can there be content created from my fans that are about the world that we are living in, right? That I've created for my fans, but they can then extend, right? They can recreate, they can, flip and interpret and have content that they can keep putting out that allows for an kind of exponential extension of what I've brought, right? And so that's where we want to kind of keep fans busy and engaging with their brand, but through them and their conversations and their creativity outside of what the artist can do. And where we've seen an interesting kind of middle ground is for the artist to send a prompt to their fans so that they do something. So rather than it being, here's, content from me, it's instead, you guys, create, this thing, right? Or create the next album art, name my album, show me, yourselves doing X, right? And then it allows for our fans to be able to take on that creativity and for other fans to consume that while the artist gets back to, the other things that they need to do. And so I think that's been an interesting thing where while the best thing, for fans is in fact to feel the artist, to engage with the artist, to touch the artist, that's never going to change, frankly. There is room for fans to help augment some of this content creation to help balance there. And very interesting things come from the fans as well, right? So it's been interesting to observe.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I always suggest for the artists and their teams is honesty and under promising and over delivering. So like, if it is going to be you and the team, like that's completely reasonable. So like, for example, Barbra Streisand, she launched even her type of fan base and her where she's at, it was a different world where you weren't usually chatting all the time with your community. So it's actually a Team Barbra phone number. So they'll sign off Team Barbra, and then Barbra will sometimes send notes and send it through. So it isn't trying to pretend that it's actually Barbra Streisand. It's very clear that this is Barbra Streisand's official phone number. And I think that really helps. I think in terms of the toxicity, there's a lot less on community because people have to sign up, opt in, and all of that. And also there isn't conversations fan to fan. So it's actually opposite of them. So it's only the artists having one-to-one conversations. And, we've created a lot of tools to make it way easier to respond to people at scale as well. So you're not overwhelmed by 25,000 people. But to the second half of your question of when, you go against what your community believes in, as an artist, I think that's a really good, I don't know if you two have an answer at all, because I actually, that's something that I'd really have to think on of I don't know how that would play out, to be honest with you, because I haven't seen it that often, because a lot of times the community that believes in you has the same values and is instilled in the same way. But there's definitely instances, especially recently, that we've seen artists not stepping up in the way that their community expects them to. So that's a great question. I'm not sure, but
yeah. I have seen, it's been a question that we get asked, okay, Jaquel, if you're going to empower my fan community, then what happens if they get too powerful, they say, or they have a mind of their own, right? And they start requesting things or, turning on me. I've literally had these conversations and I don't know either, Erica, it's scary. But it often, I think the reason why it's asked or it's a fear is because it's the unknown, because it doesn't happen that frequently, right? I think there's these outliers of people getting frustrated if they didn't get an answer right away, or they get for example, with Kanye putting out Donda 2 only on STEM player, and some fans saying, oh my gosh, now I'm buying this because I'm there, I'm here, and I can say that I'm here with this evidence on top of listening to the album. And then the other half of the fans are come on, I can't afford this $200 thing. Now I can't listen to it. I'm angry at you. There's always that dichotomy, but I think that's part of the fun, that's part of the art, and that's part of the controversy that, of course, Kanye of all people will continue. But I think it's one that, by the fans that want to stick around and align with your music and align with what you're doing, it doesn't it doesn't happen in a way that can't be, you know, turned around or fought through, or have other fans come and support. So it's interesting to see that, but it you know, it sometimes works itself out. I will say one more thing while I'm unmuted to plus one, what Erica shared about the camps also having their own life, and plus planning the what the artist is doing. We've seen that a ton, where fans care sometimes just as much of what the camp does than the artists themselves. Like Taylor Swift, for example, she has Taylor Nation, right? Olivia Rodrigo has, you know, Olivia's HQ, and they, we see fans in their bios putting like, I've been noticed by Taylor Swift one time, but for Taylor Nation, like 3 times. And they care about that. And it's in their bio because that's who they are. That's like, if you want to meet me, this is who I am. I've been noticed by Taylor Nation, right? And it's really fascinating. So I agree, right? That's a really interesting trend to watch as well.
Yeah, and I love that point you mentioned about kind of turning it around in real time. The J. Cole No Name situation is one that comes to mind. And I think, you know, if you're a big J. Cole fan, maybe while seeing his reaction to No Name is disheartening, if you're a big enough fan, like you also don't want to like cancel him in a way I think cancel culture has come across. And so the community does give space. And I think sometimes more authentic, or at least feels like credible viewpoint in trying to at least explain to the artist why what they did is a faux pas, or why it caused some tension, I guess, between the fan and the artist. I'd love to talk a little bit about fandoms and nostalgia. As a banker, I think it'd be remiss if we didn't talk about like music continues to become a big business. It's always been one. But when you look at different asset classes really starting to invest in the space, right? Namely private equity firms, you also see that kind of, they're of course betting on the catalog, right? But the catalog's ability to perform in the future and what that means. I think we've seen some really positive examples of this, right? We see a lot of folks selling their catalog or percentages of their catalog now in a way that it appears fan groups have received well. But I also think a lot about like the Scooter Braun and Taylor Swift situation, right? And how voicing that she was able to effectively weaponize her fandom against an asset or what was viewed as and purchased as an asset. What role do you think fans and fandom specifically will continue to play in kind of the underwriting or methodology when it comes to valuing these catalogs and their viability in the market?
I will start and keep this short because I think it's a straightforward answer. Like, I see it as not what role, it's they are the role. They are the ones that define it. And they are the tide, right? And everything follows them. So I will leave it at that. It's not what role, it's they are the role. There's only one.
Yeah, I think fans will increasingly be very powerful in shifting like both the economy and like the value of assets as well. I think the more that fans are engaged directly with the monetization of what creators are putting out there, which I think is a trend. I mean, obviously with Patreon, but just globally, I think there's kind of a reemergence of paying for art in a way that I think is very healthy. You kind of come out of the era of like Napster and thinking everything should be free, and we're moving into an era where people are more willing to pay directly. And I think when that happens and fans put forth their wallets, it becomes a lot more powerful in terms of the fans' voice and choice in what is being valued and how it's being valued more broadly.
I mean, 100%, like, you know, I think to your point, Jaquel, like they're the ones spending the money. If they're not spending and if they're against something, then everything halts. And I think with Taylor is in a perfect example of the power. Like that was one of my favorite examples like ever of music, of a fan base supporting an artist so much that she was like, yep, I'm going to record all my music all over again and know that they're going to stream all of that and have my back. Like that is the example, I think almost like an epitome example of a fan base having extreme power in, you know, like what is being decided in the world. So in the world, but obviously in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, super helpful. So we have a little bit under 10 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. In the meantime, I would like to talk about the evolution of fan bases as an artist gets bigger. It's something that you always see in Drake's Rap Radar interview. He talks about this like point when you're the underdog and you kind of have like a big record, everyone's starting to notice you, but you're not like this huge superstar yet, and how that's the best time in an artist kind of life cycle and the point they should savor the most. And as a result, I think it's also, if you're like an underdog fan, when you feel the most vindicated, right? Like your artist is getting all this popularity and success, but often can convert to after a while, like not liking the fan base that has grown as a result of your artist becoming more popular. I'm curious, how do you guys kind of think through the evolution of fan bases and catering your product to serve these different audiences as an artist audience evolves?
So one of the things that we're able to do is also segment by join date, right? So it's also very interesting to see, like, you know, those day ones, like what they're interested in versus someone, to your point of the more popularity thing. I think what Bryson Tiller actually, like that example of Killer Instincts, is a really interesting way that he wanted to go back to that specific moment that you're even talking about, like just throwing something on SoundCloud, like not worrying about people coming after him for, you know, not giving the proper credit for X, Y, and Z. He just threw it on SoundCloud and was like, here you go, have fun. And the people that were on there were the people that cared the most about that moment in time for Bryson, versus like, you know, the popularity second half of his audience maybe wasn't necessarily there. So for him, community, you know, groups together messages that are similar in nature, so he could see all this positivity. But then also on that SoundCloud, it was everyone in his community typing, and Bryson was in there and he was like, this is like a private listening party. I love it. And it was definitely like a lot of the day ones that had known Killer Instinct, like that was 10 years ago. So I think that there's ways in which to almost separate them out is kind of my answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I definitely see through Patreon is that there becomes a point where sometimes the fan community can become overwhelming for creators of a certain size. And that can be a bummer. Like creators are like, oh, I miss like the small intimate concerts, you know, and now I feel like I have this huge group to manage. I do think that that's a place where technology will play a really key role, where like it will get easier to manage 25,000 fans than it is right now. I even look at some creators use Facebook groups for their like fan community, and then we sometimes see like spin-off groups of that group, right? So an example of like a fan group where they spun off a second Facebook group for like the fitness fans within the fandom, right? And maybe that's an example of something where the creator is like not that into fitness, and so they don't really want to like engage with their fans around their workout routine, but the fans can engage with themselves. So I think that I feel like technology will enable that to be easier for creators, so that they don't, you know, when they hit that turning point of becoming big enough or having a big enough fan base, it doesn't feel overwhelming. It's like, oh, I have all these great tools for this. Like I'm going to be able to manage my fans really well. And then I'm going to, you know, have my really super fans or my intimate like relationships with my fans in platforms that kind of protect that and keep it safe and help it feel like cozy and intimate.
Totally. I'd love to jump into some of the questions for the audience. And we have two that I kind of want to combine together. But the first one is, what do platforms offer for discoverability of creators hoping to build followers? And then one around, how do artists and labels decide which platform has the best quality of fans? Which I think is interesting for a lot of reasons. From a discoverability standpoint, one thing I will want to call out is I think certain platforms do this better than others, especially when it comes to streaming. And a great one I think is like Audiomack. For folks that use Audiomack, is really designed, right, to help you find an audience and encourage the listeners to kind of discover new music. But curious what you guys think, one around which platforms or how to utilize platforms in a way to build a net new or grow your fan base, as well as which platform, I guess you would say, has the best quality of fans.
I love that question around quality of fans. That feels like something that will be differentiator for platforms in the future. Like I could see platforms saying like, hey, we have the least trolls and like the most dedicated listeners, you know, on this platform. I think that today, my sense from the creators I've talked to Patreon is that there's like huge variability between platforms. Like a lot of the TikTok comments can be pretty toxic, and they don't have as good moderation as the YouTube comments do today. So that's like one thing I've heard from creators, just in terms of the like toxicity of some of those spaces. But yeah, I don't know that I have a clear answer to that, but I love the idea of like platforms being able to differentiate by having higher quality fans or more engaged fans or more dedicated fans.
Yeah, and I see it as what rings true between these three platforms, at least, right? As opposed to the generalized social media, is that one step into how can I further engage with this fan beyond just, or with this artist beyond just following, right? It's like, it's that intention that I think matters, and that might be a good correlation to quality. One thing that we have too is beyond just joining a fandom, a notion of certifying fans based on the activity that they have, right? It's kind of a new arm we're getting ready to launch, which allows you to reward and recognize not just the super fans, but looking at, okay, those that are at, you know, tier 3 and have been around for a long time and are engaging in this deeper way, get a certain kind of thing, versus the ones that are at tier 1 who have really been engaging a lot and have, you know, had all of this recent activity and did these 3 special actions, right? Get this, you know, skip the line at the show, or first access to tickets, stuff like this. And I think the quality of the fans is where you really want to, I mean, we all know of the, you know, 1,000 true fans, like 100 true fans, 10,000 true fans, whatever the number is you want to use. That's very true. Like that's extremely true. And finding them in the places where people have taken that extra step, I think is the first place where you should go for that, right?
Awesome. Well, we have just under 2 minutes left, and I wanted to end around fan expectations. So, of course, all the various platforms is, you know, around catering to fans and growing that fan relationship. But how should artists think about kind of setting expectations? So, Erica, you made a great point, right, with Barbara Streisand, in the sense of like, they know her team will respond, and audience is comfortable with that. How do you guys kind of think, or what guidance would you give artists in terms of managing fan expectations?
I always say, like I said, under promise and over deliver, and setting it up front, and honesty is the best policy. So like, especially when people first started launching their community, they said that they were leaking their phone number, right? So then now that community is really popular and people know that they're not leaking their phone number, it's a phone number for their community, that feels like you've lied, you've strayed away from the truth. Instead of just saying, I got this phone number to text with you all and let you know about exclusive stuff and content, like saying that up front sets the tone that the artist knows that you're not going to respond to them when they text you at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know? I mean, the fan, you know what I mean? So I always say under promise, over deliver, because then those surprise and delight moments are really, really special for the fan and something that they hold really close.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. One of the things we hear a lot from creators at Patreon is it's hard to be a creator right now. Like you, especially if you're on some of these larger distribution platforms, you might feel like you have to be on a hamster wheel of content creation, right? Like if you're a video creator on YouTube and you don't release a video for 2 weeks, like the algorithm will basically, you know, demote you for that. And so I think that when creators come to Patreon, they often are like really overwhelmed by what they have to deliver. Like, oh my gosh, I have to give all this exclusive content and all these extra benefits, and it's going to be a lot of work. And I think it's important for creators to know that like the fans are often there to support you, to just be more involved, to like see the behind the scenes sneak peeks of your work. You don't have to like create a whole second podcast or a whole nother content stream. So yeah, I think your advice, Erica, is best, is just like, think about what's manageable for you and tell your fans how engaged or how not engaged you're going to be with them.
Agreed. I'd say authenticity is what we see, because we see what fans are talking about and what they're talking about with each other and what they care about the most. It's always if the artist pours out their heart in a certain body of work, that matters so much more to them, because they can pick all the parts in between. It'll last longer than like a dozen songs that are like, you know. So authenticity far and few between. It rings so much more than just like a constant flood of things that the fan can't be completely touched by. Then that sets you up for better expectations, right?
Totally. The key to every great relationship is communication. And I think in all of your answers that rings through. Jaquel, Erica, Maura, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm looking forward to learning more from you all.
Thank you so much for having us.